My name is Troy, and I learned the hard way that sometimes the person sleeping next to you is already planning their exit while you're still trying to save the marriage. I'd been married to Rebecca for 8 years when I first started noticing the distance. 8 years that had begun with genuine love and partnership, but had gradually morphed into something hollow and transactional. I owned a small manufacturing business in Austin, Texas. We made custom metal fabrications for construction companies and designers. Rebecca worked in corporate marketing for a multinational company downtown. It's a stable white-collar job that complements my entrepreneurial risk-taking. When we'd gotten married, we'd seemed like a good team. Her stability balancing my business ventures, both of us contributing financially, both of us building toward a shared future. Around year 6 of marriage, things gradually changed. The shift was gradual enough that I didn't notice it happening in real time. Conversations became more about logistics than connection. Who was handling which bill? Whether we needed to call the plumber. When her company's holiday party was scheduled. Surface-level exchanges that kept the household running, but didn't require any actual intimacy. Our physical relationship deteriorated in parallel. What had once been natural and frequent became more perfunctory. She'd be tired, stressed, or just not in the mood. I'd be exhausted from work. We went from several times a week to maybe twice a month to seldom. By year 7, we were essentially roommates who happened to share a last name and a mortgage. I noticed and was worried about it. I tried occasionally to address it by suggesting date nights or weekend trips. She'd agree half-heartedly. We'd go through the motions, but nothing would change. Many months after our 8th anniversary, things got noticeably worse. Rebecca started insisting she needed space. Would spend entire weekends at her sister Angela's house across town, claiming she needed mental clarity and time away from our routine. She would come home Sunday evening and act like this was perfectly normal for spouses to regularly spend their weekend apart. I tried to be understanding as opposed to the feeling in my gut. I would assume that maybe she was going through something or dealing with stress I didn't fully comprehend. But she's supposed to let me know if there is something wrong with her. I know relationships go through rough patches. We just needed to work through this phase. Our 9th anniversary was approaching. I thought maybe making an effort for that milestone would help rekindle something. I planned to do something special, show her I was paying attention, and wanted to reconnect. I reached out to my wife's sister, Angela, for suggestions. Asked what Rebecca might like, restaurant recommendations, gift ideas. Angela was helpful. She gave me some tips about restaurants, suggested jewelry, and a weekend spa package. I made reservations at the restaurant, bought an expensive necklace Rebecca had mentioned wanting months earlier, and tried to create a romantic evening that might break through the distance between us or at least renew something inside of her. The anniversary dinner wasn't what I expected. Rebecca accepted the gift with polite thanks, smiled at appropriate moments during dinner, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. We had small talk the rest of the evening. The spark didn't return. If anything, the evening just highlighted how far apart we drifted. After that failed attempt, I decided to seek professional help. I genuinely loved Rebecca, or loved who we'd been together, and didn't want to give up without trying everything. I found a marriage counselor who had good reviews. I made an appointment, went alone since Rebecca had declined to come with me, claiming she didn't think we needed therapy. I sat in the counselor's office and explained the situation. The emotional distance. Rebecca's need for constant space. The dead bedroom. The feeling that my wife was physically present but emotionally checked out of our marriage. The counselor listened carefully to everything I described. When I finished, she was quiet for some seconds before speaking. Because I asked for the brutal truth of what she thinks, she told me, based on her 20 years of experience with troubled marriages, that the pattern I was describing strongly suggested Rebecca was having an affair. The emotional withdrawal, the need for space, the weekends away, the complete loss of physical intimacy, all classic signs of a spouse who'd emotionally invested elsewhere. She added something that hit me hard. Rebecca might already be planning her exit from a marriage. The complete emotional disconnect often preceded someone leaving once they'd arranged their affairs. I sat there processing this information. My first instinct was to reject it. Rebecca wouldn't cheat. We'd made vows. We'd built a life together. People didn't just have affairs without some obvious sign. The counselor must have seen the denial on my face. She encouraged me, gently but firmly, to verify before making any decisions. Suggested hiring a private investigator. She'd seen too many clients ignore obvious signs only to be blindsided later. I left her office in a daze. Drove home trying to reconcile the woman I'd married with the possibility that she was betraying our marriage. I spent a few days in denial before finally accepting that I needed to know the truth. I found a private investigation firm with strong credentials. Met with an investigator who explained how surveillance worked, what evidence they could gather, and what it would cost me. Expensive, but worth it if it saved me from walking blind into a disaster. I hired him to follow Rebecca, track her movements on the weekends she claimed to be at Angela's, document who she was meeting, where she was going. Over the next several weeks, while James worked in the background, I kept trying to save my marriage. Tried initiating conversations with Rebecca about how distant we'd become. Suggested counseling again. Asked if there was anything I could do differently to help her feel happier. She was consistently dismissive. She would say she is fine, just trying to find herself. Claimed she needed space to figure out what she wanted. Made it clear that my efforts to connect felt like pressure she didn't want. So I withdrew. Stopped pushing. Focused on my business, and gave her the space she claimed to need while feeling progressively worse about where our marriage was headed. I also started paying more attention to our finances. Checked our joint bank account regularly. Noticed something I'd previously overlooked. Small transfers from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. A few $100s here, 1,000 there. Not huge amounts individually, but they added up over several months. When I traced the account number, I found it was a new account Rebecca had opened in her name only about 6 months earlier. An account I hadn't known existed. She was quietly moving money out of our joint finances into her private account. That realization, combined with the counselor's statement, made everything click into place. Rebecca wasn't just emotionally checked out. She was actively preparing to leave. After 4 weeks, the investigator sent me photos and video footage. Rebecca had been lying about staying at Angela's. On multiple weekends, she'd actually been at a hotel downtown, meeting a man, someone who worked at the same company as Rebecca did. The photos showed all the evidence needed to prove an affair that had clearly been going on for a while now. The investigator explained that they chose places where they thought no one who knew them would see. As I looked at all this evidence, I had this clear certainty that my marriage was over. I thanked the investigator, paid his final invoice, and saved all the documentation he sent to me. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Rebecca directly. Confrontation wouldn't lead to anything significant. She knew what she was doing. I do not want denials, gaslighting, or manipulation. She'd claimed the photos were misunderstood or taken out of context. This would buy time to better position herself for the divorce I now knew was likely coming. She is probably still here because I am nice to her. I made up my mind that I'd protect myself, prepare for what was inevitable. The next day, I met up with my attorney, who is also a close friend. He is someone who'd helped me with business contracts and knows my financial situation well. I asked him what he thinks would happen if my wife, of many years, is planning to file for divorce. My attorney thought it was one of my hypothetical questions, so he laughed over it. When I told him that this was a serious situation, he became direct. Texas is a community property state, which means in a divorce, assets acquired during marriage get split 50-50. My business had grown significantly during our 8 years of marriage. Rebecca could claim half its value. Our house, our joint savings, everything would be divided. Moreover, we'd been married for over 9 years and were approaching the 10-year mark. After 10 years of marriage in Texas, spousal support becomes much more likely and substantial. If Rebecca waited until we crossed that threshold to file, she could potentially be entitled to alimony for years. It made sense to me that the timing of her affair, the secret bank account, the emotional withdrawal while maintaining the marriage, it all suggested she was positioning herself for maximum benefit in a divorce. My attorney asked what I wanted to do. Whether I wanted to file first so he could contact a specified divorce attorney, then try to beat her to the punch. I thought about it. Filing first would give me some strategic advantage, but would accelerate everything. Rebecca would scramble, the divorce would be contentious, and we'd fight over every asset. Instead, I asked my attorney to help me protect what I could legally before she filed. We spent several weeks developing a strategy. The goal was to restructure my assets in ways that were completely legal and transparent, but would remove them from immediate marital property classification. First, we created a business trust, transferred ownership of my manufacturing company into the trust, with me as the beneficiary. The company's value would be protected from immediate divorce settlement since it was now held in trust rather than personally owned. We documented everything meticulously, filed all proper paperwork with the state, made sure every step was legal and defensible if challenged in court. Next, I moved my personal savings out of the joint account and into an account in my name linked to the business trust. Stopped depositing business profits into our joint account. Instead, I deposit only what was needed for household bills and basic expenses. My attorney structured everything to be audit-proof. We weren't hiding assets or committing fraud. We were legally reorganizing before a divorce was filed. Courts generally couldn't force you to undo legal financial restructuring done before separation. The entire process took several months. During that time, I maintained normal appearances at home, continued the roommate routine with Rebecca, didn't let on that I knew about her affair or that I was preparing for our marriage to end. About 3 months into the asset protection process, Rebecca noticed that less money was flowing into our joint account. She approached me one evening while I was making dinner, asked why the deposits had decreased significantly. I explained calmly that I was restructuring how the business money flowed for tax purposes. I didn't explain beyond this, and she seemed to accept this explanation without digging deeper. Probably didn't want to show too much interest in my business finances, given what she was planning. The restructuring was completed about 8 months after I found out about my wife's affair. All my major assets were legally protected as much as possible. Then I waited. Months passed as we approached our 10th anniversary. At this point, we were living as roommates completely. Separate bedrooms most nights. Minimal conversation. No pretense of actual marriage. I kept expecting Rebecca to file. Kept waiting for the day I'd be served with papers. But she didn't. We crossed our 10th anniversary without comment. I realized what she was doing. She was waiting deliberately. Letting us cross that 10-year threshold would strengthen her position for spousal support. The longer we stayed married past 10 years, the better her case for long-term alimony. I stayed patient, letting her play her game. Then, 2 weeks after our 10th anniversary, she made her move. I came home from work to find Rebecca waiting in the living room. She had a manila envelope in her hands and an expression I'd never seen before. She handed me the envelope without preamble. Divorce papers. She was filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Told me she'd already moved most of her personal belongings. She'd be staying at Angela's temporarily while everything got sorted out. Her tone was cold and detached, like she was conducting a business transaction rather than ending a once happy marriage. She explained that her attorney would be in touch about further communication, that she expected this to be handled fairly and quickly. The smugness in her voice was unmistakable. She clearly believed she timed everything perfectly, filed after 10 years, positioned herself for substantial spousal support, and assumed she'd walk away with half of everything. Her attorney had probably told her this would be straightforward, that I wouldn't see it coming and wouldn't have time to do anything before discovery began. She'd waited years, maintaining a dead marriage while having her affair and preparing financially. Now she was finally pulling the trigger, confident she'd come out ahead. I looked at the papers, looked at her, felt nothing except a cold satisfaction that I'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. I told her my attorney would be in touch, that I hoped we could handle this maturely. She nodded and left. Walked out of our house for the last time. I called my attorney immediately. Told him we'd been served. He'd been expecting it. The divorce process moved into discovery. Rebecca's attorney requested documentation of all our financial assets. Gerald provided everything. But what Rebecca's attorney found wasn't what they'd expected. My business was held in trust, restructured about a year before the divorce filing. My personal savings were in accounts tied to that trust. The house was titled in my name from before our marriage, with documentation showing I'd purchased it before we met. Our only significant joint asset was the joint checking account, which had a minimal balance because I'd been depositing only household expense money there for months. I'd followed every legal requirement in doing all these. Rebecca's attorney tried arguing that the restructuring was done in anticipation of divorce and should be reversed. But my attorney countered with evidence that I'd consulted with my business attorney about tax planning long before any divorce filing. Had documentation of legitimate business reasons for the trust structure. More importantly, my attorney introduced all the evidence of Rebecca's affair and the money she'd been siphoning from our joint funds. Argued that her affair had destroyed the marriage, that she'd actively planned her exit while deceiving me over the years, that she'd strategically waited until after our 10th anniversary to maximize her spousal support claim. Under Texas law, adultery can affect property division and spousal support. While it doesn't automatically disqualify someone from receiving support, it's a factor judges consider. Combined with evidence of financial misconduct, Rebecca's case looked much weaker than she'd anticipated. My attorney also argued dissipation of marital assets. That Rebecca had secretly withdrawn thousands from our joint account for her affair. Those expenditures had depleted marital assets for her personal benefit. About 4 months into the divorce proceedings, after multiple mediation sessions and discovery exchanges, Rebecca's attorney apparently had a come-to-Jesus conversation with her. Her legal team realized the case wasn't going as planned. Most of my significant assets were legally protected. They had evidence of her affair and financial misconduct. Her claim for substantial spousal support was undermined by her adultery and the fact that she had a good income of her own. She might walk away with a modest settlement, but nothing close to the windfall she'd anticipated. That's when Rebecca's demeanor completely changed. She started texting me. Messages saying she'd been hasty in filing, that maybe we'd moved too fast, that she thought we could still fix our marriage if we tried. Showed up at the house one evening, claiming she needed to pick up something she'd forgotten. Lingered, acting remorseful and vulnerable. Suggested we get dinner sometime and talk things through. I stayed distant but polite. Didn't engage with her emotional manipulation, argue, or get angry. I told her my attorney was handling everything and we should communicate through legal channels. Her attempts to reconcile intensified over the next few weeks. Once, she even suggested couples counseling, the same counseling she'd refused to attend when I'd suggested it a year earlier. It was transparent what was happening. This wasn't love or genuine remorse. It was damage control. She'd realized she was on the losing end of the divorce and was trying to stall or reverse the process. She tried stalling the proceedings, asked her attorney to delay, to request more time, clearly hoping I might reconsider or that she could find some legal angle to challenge the asset protection. I didn't respond emotionally to any of it. We agreed to mediation as my attorney advised, but only to finalize things efficiently. The mediation session was tense. Rebecca, her attorney, my attorney, and me sitting around a conference table at a neutral office. Rebecca's attorney tried one more time to argue that my asset restructuring was fraudulent. My attorney calmly presented all our documentation, showing legitimate business purposes and proper legal procedures. Rebecca herself tried appealing to me directly, mentioned our years together, the good times we'd had, how she'd made mistakes, but had been planning to work on things. I listened without expression. When she finished, my attorney spoke. He reiterated that we were there to finalize the divorce, not revisit the marriage. We settled. Rebecca would receive thousands of dollars, representing her portion of our accumulated joint savings from before the restructuring. She'd receive spousal support of $2,000 per month for a year. She'd keep her car and personal possessions. No long-term alimony or claim on future business profits. Far less than half of what I'd accumulated during our marriage. But legal, defensible, and final. Rebecca signed reluctantly. Her attorney probably advised her that fighting further would cost more in legal fees than she'd recover. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. 10 years of marriage ended with a judge's signature on paperwork. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard she played the victim publicly. Told anyone who'd listen that I'd ruined her. That I'd hidden assets and manipulated the divorce to leave her with nothing. Painted herself as a wrong spouse rather than acknowledging her affair or her calculated plan to maximize her payout. I didn't engage with any of it. Without the stress of a failing marriage and the distraction of divorce proceedings, I could focus fully on the company. Looking back, I understand several things clearly. I learned that sometimes the person beside you is already planning their exit while you're still fighting to save the relationship. Rebecca had emotionally divorced me long before she filed papers. My attempts to reconnect were futile because she'd already invested elsewhere. I learned that protecting yourself isn't vindictive, it's necessary. I could have confronted Rebecca when I first discovered the affair, filed for divorce immediately in anger. Instead, I prepared strategically and legally. That preparation saved me financially. I learned that timing matters in divorce. Rebecca deliberately waited until after our 10th anniversary to file, calculating that it would maximize her spousal support claim. By restructuring my assets before she filed, I countered her strategy legally and ethically. I learned that evidence is everything. The documentation of her affair gave me leverage in negotiations. My attorney's meticulous legal work on the asset restructuring made it defensible in court. Without evidence, I would have been in a much weaker position. I learned that emotional manipulation intensifies when someone realizes they're losing. Rebecca's sudden attempts at reconciliation weren't genuine remorse. They were panic when she understood her calculated plan had failed. Most importantly, I learned that you can be completely ethical and legal while still protecting yourself from someone who isn't acting in good faith. I didn't hide assets or commit fraud. I reorganized my finances transparently before the divorce. That's not wrong, that's wise. Some people might argue I was cold or calculating. A loving husband would have confronted his wife about the affair and tried to save the marriage. But Rebecca had already made her choice. She'd chosen another man over me, chosen deception over honesty. She chose to strategically plan a divorce that would maximize her benefit rather than ending things honorably when she decided the marriage was over. My choice was simply to protect myself from her choices. The affair ended my marriage emotionally. Her filing ended it legally. But my preparation ensured I didn't lose everything I'd built because of her betrayal. Rebecca had played a long game, maintaining the marriage while having her affair, positioning herself financially, waiting for the 10-year mark. I played a longer game, recognizing what she was doing, protecting my assets legally, letting her think she had the advantage until it was too late for her to adjust her strategy. I don't regret how I handled it. Don't feel guilty about the outcome. I'd make the same choices again without hesitation. Because sometimes the most ethical thing you can do is recognize when someone is planning to hurt you and take legal steps to minimize that damage. And I'm at peace with exactly how it played out.